All right, everybody, welcome to Virtual Monsterama 2020. My name is Darren Bush. I am a co-director of tracks and paneling here at Monsterama this year. We are going to be talking to 5 authors who have got some experience with publishing and how to publish. So what I'm going to do is, before we get into too many details, I want to go ahead and let everybody introduce themselves. I'm going to, because of the nature of the virtualness of this meeting, I'm going to actually call on you guys in some semblance of an order here. So AR, why don't you introduce yourself to our wonderful fans?
Hello, everyone. My pen name is A.R. Cook. I'm actually Allison Rieger Cook, and I am a young adult fantasy author. I'm actually a hybrid author. I had a small indie publisher, which I published a trilogy called The Scholar and the Sphinx. I know it's backwards on the video. I've also self-published a series called The Scale Seekers. And I have also had short stories published in a series of various fantasy anthologies. In fact, this one's getting a sequel by the end of this year. I am also a playwright, and right now I'm also focusing on screenwriting. So that is me in a nutshell.
All right, thank you, Allison. Welcome. And next, I think I'm going alphabetically by first name. So Bobby, introduce yourself, please.
Hi, I'm Bobby Nash. I'm an author. I write novels, comic books, this and that, short stories, whatever they're hiring for, I'm probably writing it. I have dabbled in screenplays, and this year I wrote my first straight to audio scripts, which is pretty cool. And yeah, I'm also a hybrid author. I work for publishers, and I also have my own indie press. So that's me.
All right, thank you, Bobby. Ellie, you're up.
All right. I write fantasy generally. I've got a series, the Necrosine Chronicles. I guess we show them books. So I got a book. That's the book. Mine is currently a 5-book series. I started that series with a small press, and I eventually just decided to do my own thing with that particular series, but I still have a novella with a different small publisher, so I kind of have a perspective in both. So I'll try and be as helpful as I can.
All right, thank you. Kyle.
Hi, I'm Kyle Mitchell. I've self-published 2 books of poetry, which you see behind me here. And shortly after, I published them first in 2002 and then the second book in 2005. I also did a lot of what other authors do, book signings, readings, and also taught young people about self-publishing. So, and I've been in many panels and so forth with Darren and around the Atlanta convention scene for years before moving to Austin. So.
Okay. Well, welcome back to Atlanta, Kyle. And Sarah?
I'm Sarah. My debut novel released last year from an indie press called The Parliament House out of Florida. I've had short fiction in both Jordan Kahn anthologies. Oh, books. And there's another super secret project I'm not allowed to talk about yet, but being shopped around. And my work in progress is a noir fantasy. Pretty much everything I write is a crossover of some kind, but has magic in it. So.
Excellent. Excellent. So just in case anybody's wondering, I did not have my first name legally changed to Monsterama. I am listed on Amazon as Darren M. Bush, M as in Mark. I've been published in what I believe would be considered a micropress, a couple of micropress anthologies. And recently I've been trying to get my stuff out on the Kindle as appropriate. I have a little bit of experience with trying to figure out some simple ways to get some stuff just out there. So I will attempt to contribute also. But let me go back to the point of this panel. This is the Which Way Should I Turn Deciding How to Publish panel. If you're looking for the Beneath the Planet of the Apes panel, sorry, you're stuck with us for the next 45 minutes. What's happening is, as I was talking to folks about this topic, Sarah, I'm gonna put Sarah on the spot here, brought a little bit of focus to this conversation about how there seem to be a lot of misconceptions about self-publishing and small press and et cetera, as if there aren't, in this day of technology and the internet, 85 ways to get a short story or a novel published, or to try to get one published. So Sarah, like I said, I'm gonna put you on the spot here. what was it you were thinking, or who were you thinking about when you responded to me with that suggestion?
Well, I have a whole lot of friends who have gone the small press route and had these expectations of being in bookstores all over the place and having all this marketing going behind them. And they end up really soured on small presses because these little indie presses can't deliver on any of that. So I was thinking that maybe kind of clear up some of those misconceptions, talk about how the small press route differs from self-publishing. I mean, we both routes, you get a lot more control than you would going with one of the big New York houses. But I feel like there's a lot of people out there that go one direction and they're so excited and they kind of have a horrible debut experience because they just can't deliver.
Mm-hmm. Let me start by asking what might sound like a silly question, but I think it's important. Are any of our panelists, were any of you never ever interested in having one of the big publishers pick up one of your books or collections or short story, anything like that? Was anybody ever like, nah, I don't want to have anything to do with the big publishers? I'm seeing a lot of confused faces.
No, when I started, because I've been doing this a little while now. When I started, it was really looked down on, the small press and self-publishing, especially. You know, if you self-published in the '90s, you know, it was because you weren't good enough to work for a real publisher. That's how a lot of people looked at it. And you know, the self-publishing and the small press has become more accepted, you know, since then. But when I first started, though, those were my options, and man, it was not easy, and I never quite made it to the big five. I've worked with some mid-range publishers, but never, you know, I can't get past the finding an agent part. So.
Okay. Well, so where I was going with that is that in general, I think every writer would love to have somebody show up in a really expensive car in a suit and say, "Here, can I give you a lot of cash for what you've written?" Right? I think we're all reasonable with that fantasy. Just like I don't think there are that many musicians who wouldn't want to win a Grammy Award or something like that. You know, it's that kind of thing. But does anybody want to? And I'm not gonna point any fingers. Does anybody want to comment about the struggle with finding out the hard way about the reality of publishing? Does anybody want to start with that?
Well, I'll jump in before the experts here. But I was working at Barnes & Noble in 2002 when my wife, my biggest cheerleader, as we all have that support system, said, "Hey, you know, you really need to get your stuff published. It's good." And thankfully, I was working at Barnes & Noble at the time, and iUniverse was putting coupons in the bags for customers for a discount to publish through iUniverse. You know, small print on demand publisher, which now they've changed their name. But while there, I also was working with a children's book author, Renee Saldana Jr., who got a contract with Random House. And then a year and a half later, he still had his contract with Random. And so that's where I learned firsthand, working at Barnes & Noble with this author, that it took about two and a half years for the whole process, from when we were all like, "Yay, great job, you made it big time, one of the big five," and then took 2 years to come out. So that opened my eyes to the reality of the struggle, even after you got your book deal.
Mm-hmm. Does anybody? Go ahead, Ellie.
Sorry, the waiting, yeah, most people don't really realize how long it takes to produce these things, especially for a big publisher or a small publisher who has multiple books that are coming out with throughout the year. And so they're trying to juggle each one of these things as they're going, and they're trying to give as much attention as they can possibly do. But, honestly, from what I have read, the big publishers particularly have a set budget that they can give to the new authors versus the mid-listers versus their bestsellers. Their bestsellers are bestsellers, so they make more money, therefore they have more budget in their system for them to market more. So it's currently a system that promotes the people who are currently making more money, or maybe not, depending. You know, Chuck Palahniuk had that whole nightmare happen. So that's another thing to consider. I guess we might get into that later. I don't know yet. But it's kind of right now a system where success begets success. And I don't really know if there's another way out of that, but that's kind of what it is right now. And I feel like because that's coming out more in the publishing world, more people are turning to the self-published or the smaller presses because you get a little bit more attention to that. But even with the small presses, they only have a set amount of budget they can give you because they're a business. They're a business too. They need to think about keeping the business alive, because keeping the business alive helps the authors with them stay alive. So I understand where they're all coming from. I don't know if there's really a solution to that amount of attention they can only give to certain authors, but that's just what it is right now.
Okay. Did anyone else want to deal with the question about bad experiences before we move on?
Well, I mean,
I can talk about it for a minute. No, sorry, go ahead.
go ahead.
Okay, I just wanted to say that when I was first querying my debut novel, it's really kind of an off-the-wall concept, and those there weren't agents or big presses that would want to take a chance on a nobody like me because I haven't achieved that level of success like Ellie was talking about.
Mm-hmm.
So going the small press route was a really natural fit for me when I found this, this press that really specializes in the weird and not quite your run-of-the-mill money makers.
Yeah, and no matter which publisher, big, little, indie, yourself, these days, the marketing is 90% on the responsibility of the author.
Absolutely.
That whether you're working for the big five or you're doing it yourself or whatever, you are expected to do most of that now. Gone are the days where they send you on a book tour and pay for it, or you travel around. That doesn't happen.
Yeah, I will say though, my experience has shown that part of your marketing depends on the cover. Unfortunately, I hate that it is, but there are certain books that don't sell at all, no matter how much we market it. And then there are books that sell like hotcakes, even if we don't market it. And it sucks, but like it's part of your marketing. You can shell out hundreds of dollars getting posters or advertisements or whatever for a book, but if the cover isn't working for that, then you've just wasted your money because it won't really help that much. It might get you 1 or 2 buys, but it's not going to help buy the hundreds of dollars you shelled into it. And it's very frustrating when, from my personal experience, you don't have the control over the cover. You just don't have that control. Maybe they'll come to you to ask what your opinion is. Maybe they won't. It just depends. But either way, it's not completely in your control what your cover is. So that's kind of another factor to consider if you're looking for traditional publishers in general, is, look at the covers, see if, they might work out for you. Maybe they work for your genre, maybe they don't. Maybe they've worked with your genre more. Maybe they haven't worked with your genre and they want to try something new. That's for you to decide. But, always make sure your contracts have a reasonable, I forgot the term, the closing deal clause in it. So if you ever decide to part ways, you can do that easily without anyone, having issues. Because sometimes you just need to try it out to know it doesn't work. That's my experience with it. But you absolutely need to do your own marketing. And so if you want that 100% control, maybe self-publishing is the way for you, because then you can control, a little bit more of your marketing, because your cover is a lot of marketing.
Yeah.
And as authors now, I know in my experience, I spend almost as much time doing that part of the job as I do actually writing. There's a lot of admin and promotion and behind the scenes things that take up a lot of my time as having my own indie press or working with other publishers too. I'm still doing all of that. And so you have to, I think a lot of people just think I wrote my story, I turned it in, I'm done. And that's not the case.
Okay. Allison, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yes, I think well, what comes up the most for me when people say when they get disappointed is they want to be writers, not marketers, or because a lot of writers are very introverted. That's why we like to write. It gives us our me time. It allows us to express ourselves, but marketing is very extroverted kind of thing. It's getting in front of people and being on social media. So you almost have to be an ambivert to balance it out. And a lot of people just get very disappointed when they realize that they have to do the marketing. I remember reading an article, I wish I could remember the author's name, but she had 5 books with Simon & Schuster. They gave her no marketing. She had to do it all herself. So even when you get in with a big publisher and you get multiple books, they may still say, no, you still have to do your own marketing. And that's, I think, the most disappointing thing for a lot of writers.
I think it's very telling that James Patterson is doing his own commercials. He's hiring companies to do commercials for his books, which sell in the millions already.
I didn't
So
know that. Wow.
if he's having to pay to make his own commercials, they're not going. If they're not doing it for him, they're not going to do it for us.
Mm-hmm. So is that really the biggest of these misconceptions, or is this kind of the overarching umbrella of what we're talking about, that a lot of us have these imaginings of what it's like to live as a writer from, I don't know, movies that Stephen King wrote that are essentially about himself, or I'm thinking of Misery, but I guess that's one of the things I'm wondering about is hearing you guys talk. Why do so many people think that there is this moment where you finished writing and you are done?
If you ever see a writer, an author in a movie or a TV show, there's a couple of things you will always see. They're rich. They don't actually spend a lot of time writing, and they probably solve a murder or two a year.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, in fact, I remember seeing the movie, I think it was Something's Gotta Give, one where Diane Keaton is a playwright. And she lives like in a mansion by the sea and is super rich. And I think it was my dad who is also playwright. He goes, there's no playwright that lives in a mansion by the sea like that. This is totally unrealistic. Yeah. But that's what we like to watch. I guess movies are fantasies to an extent.
So that's a very interesting point. And it suddenly occurred to me, who wrote that story about that author? An author. And so every once in a while I watch one of these TV shows or movies and I think someone is playing out their own fantasy for the rest of us to suffer through.
Well, it's kind of like we say, Darren, when we do improv, nobody wants to hear about usual days. You would hear about unusual days.
Yeah.
That concept in improv. And so I think that the average author that's really doing it day in, day out for profit, especially if they're able to do that full time, right? Obviously, either is independently wealthy beforehand, or that kind of portrayal of them in fiction is truly just fiction.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's do this. Let's go around the horn again, and I know some of you touched this on your introductions, but what I want you to do is very quickly just let me know what kind of publishing you are comfortable with saying that you're doing, if you follow me. But I'm currently focusing on short stories. I'm putting stuff on the Kindle, and I'm submitting to a lot of contests, and I'm having a lot of fun with that. I have to admit, I'm having a heck of a lot of fun doing that. One of the things I will note on real quickly, back to Ellie's point, is I don't have to get anyone's permission to put a cover on stuff on the Kindle, but then I have to make it or pay somebody for it. So there's that balance there. So Ellie, since I mentioned you, I'm going to pick on you. How are you currently publishing?
Right now we are focusing on just the self-published stuff with the series. I am actually super tired right now because I just finished an epic fantasy pentology that I've been working on for turns out it was since 2006. So what's that, 14 years?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I found a really old drawing from when I was in high school from that. It was dated 2006 with one of the characters, so I guess that's how long I've been working on it. So I finally finished that, and I also finished a children's illustration book and another prequel for that series, which was like 60,000 words long. So I'm pretty tired, and I still have like a huge list of stories to get to, so right now I'm taking a break. So
Okay.
I'm kind of focusing a little bit more on marketing the series that I have and the books that I have done
Mm-hmm.
until we get a new house, because we're house hunting, and I have a 2-year-old that we got to take care of, and you know we're in a pandemic here,
Yeah.
so I'm focusing down. I'm working on website stuff, and in the meantime, I'm accumulating outlines for the next
Okay.
series.
But you
So
said
like
your
that.
you said your 5-book series was self-published. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And for those of you keeping score, the pandemic came up after 21 minutes. So Kyle, what about you? What is your current publishing scheme?
Mostly just scrawling restroom walls, and just kind of
Okay, moving on to
lots of exposure. No, guerrilla marketing kind of, No, actually, the latest ones that I've submitted were for poems were for university presses. And like you, Darren, contests. And before that, for my 2 books of poetry, I self-published with iUniverse first for slang, and then A Dream of Christmas I published through lulu.com. And then along the way, also, I've been contacted by people for use of my poem or a one-off poem in a show, or to publish here in their newsletter or this or that, basically just for free. And even was asked by a website that kind of collects holiday poetry if I would give them permission to publish my holiday poems on their website. So that's even a different sub layer
yeah.
of publishing. And so I gave them permission to publish poems on there, since I self-published and had the rights to all of mine. And so that's where I'm going. And actually right now I'm in the process of working on a chapbook. So I'm going even smaller, and it'll be 14 or 15 poems, all on the same theme. And I'm looking at that, actually pitching to indie presses, like a smaller press, instead of self-publishing with that. That's what my plans are for that chapbook.
Okay. Sarah, how about you?
Okay, well, I'm not supposed to be doing this yet.
We are
when
recording.
When I met my husband, I told him I wanted to stay home with kids at some point. At that time, I had a house, so I put him through college. I worked and I put him through college, and the plan was then we were going to have kids, and then I was going to, when they went to school, I was going to work on my writing career. Well, I wrote the first book while I was still working, and when I was pregnant with my first daughter. I wrote the second book just after she was born, when she was young, and that's the one that got published with the Parliament House. And then I wrote my third one now that my second daughter is here. I have a 6-year-old and a 2-year-old. And so I'm not supposed to be doing any of this yet. But that said, I just submitted a short story last week to a Kickstarter anthology called Don't Touch That, which is all about parenting and science fiction fantasy. And it's about a baby kraken. And then I'm also querying my third book, which is Fairy Godmurder, which is a noir fantasy about a fairy godmother who goes rogue to hunt down the serial killer who offed her first princess.
Okay.
And then, then there's something else that is out on submission that I'm not allowed to talk about yet, but
Right.
It's with somebody. It's a collaboration that is with somebody else's agent. So I'm in the query trenches, basically, is probably
Right.
the short answer.
What I love is that for something you're not allowed to talk about, that's the third time you mentioned it. So that's excellent.
I'm excited about it.
Yes.
I want to talk about it.
You want to? Yes, we all do. We do want to talk about our project.
Can I ask you a question, Sarah, based off that? Probably going to derail a little bit. So the first book that you wrote when you said you were pregnant, do you remember writing it? Because I wrote an entire novella. Hi, sweetie. I wrote a whole
On
novella
cue.
while I was like in the last couple like months of that, and I don't remember writing a word of it at all. But everyone keeps telling me stuff about it, and I'm like, oh, okay, maybe, maybe I did that. I don't know. So, do you remember any of that?
I do, but that's because I was still working at the county at the time. So I would do my day job, and then I would take my steal 30 minutes here, an hour there, and work at my computer.
That's great.
I tell you what, next year I'll put together a panel about that. But I'm not going to be on it.
Write it down.
I'll write that. I'll jot that down. Allison, how about you? How are you currently working on publishing?
Well, I will say this has been a really interesting year after moving back to Illinois. In terms of books, I'm actually involved with projects that I have found is actually my favorite form of publishing books, which are these collective anthologies where you're working with other writers and you're part of a shared world. I just realized I like this so much more. It's more enjoyable to me than, say, writing a book solo, because then you're actually working with other people. It's building the world even bigger than you may by yourself. So, like I said, there's going to be a sequel to an anthology called Chronicles of Mirestone. It'll be out before the end of the year, and it's a shared world. I think it's going to be very awesome for people, especially who love high fantasy. Also, another anthology, which will be out in October, called Women of the Woods. At least that's the tentative title. And it's actually going to be the perfect Halloween read, because it's all about, like the title says, women who live in the woods. They witches and sorceresses. My character's a necromancer. So that's going to be a fun book. And I just find, yeah, the collaborative.
I pre-order it.
So the collaboration with other writers, is that then being published by is that going to technically be self-published, or is that a small press?
The Women of the Woods is a small press. It's called the Fabled Collective.
Mm-hmm.
And the Chronicles of Mirestone, it's under Dragonfire Press, but that's more of a self-published group. Otherwise, my main focus this year has been screenwriting. And I've actually done pretty well. I actually placed in the Austin Film Festival this year.
Oh.
And that's my first time ever submitting, so I was kind of blown away by that. So I think I will keep working on that.
Excellent. Thank you, Allison. Okay, so Bobby, I saved you for last because I'm expecting this to be a very long answer, but let's see if you can keep it under 20 minutes.
Nothing. Doing absolutely
nothing. You given up?
Yeah,
I
see.
I see that you're spending all your time making your own books into posters, according to your background.
The one corner of my office. Yes, we don't want to look over there. I bounce my schedule back and forth between doing stuff on my own and doing stuff for publishers. During last year, I decided to give more of my self-publishing company make more of a go of it. Whereas in the past, I was doing it just for either things that had gone out of print and getting them back into print, or doing just specialty projects. Last year, I started making plans to make a real go of it as a publishing entity. So I do I schedule more stuff now, whereas I used to just work those in when I could. And but I still work for other publishers, mostly small to medium, size publishers, doing things like anthologies. Like Allison said, those are a lot of fun. I also do licensed characters. And so you have to go to whoever has the license to work on those. Mm-hmm. So sometimes I get invited to do things like that. And so right now I haven't really submitted anything in a couple of years. It's been really kind of nice. I've actually had publishers come to me and say, you want to work on something? And so, but I'm doing stuff for a variety of publishers. And so the biggest hurdle that my time goes through is figuring out when to schedule them and when to work on them. So it almost becomes an assembly line at times, because you're like, man, I'm really excited for this. I want to work on this project, but you're like, no, this one's due. And so, yeah, so I bounce between those that way. But I find it a lot of fun, because that way I can still, before I was focusing on my publishing company, stuff that I wanted to do that was mine was always getting pushed to the side as other assignments came in. So now I've got it to where I can really juggle it. I've learned to say no to things, or can it wait 6 months? And if they say yes, then we can, go from there. If they say no, I can say, yeah, can't do it. And so, but I keep busy with doing a lot of novella work. I get novella assignments from publishers where we're going to put several stories in a book. The self-publishing route, I came up with this idea of doing novellas because I thought it would be great to sell stuff that was less expensive. Like the snow books tend to be like 30,000 words a story. And so more of an ebook seller, and then we collect them as we get enough for a book, that kind of thing. So they're playing with different things like that to try to move my characters forward. And there's a lot of experimentation and things like that. I've come up with new ways to get my stuff out. And so not only is it the writing, but it's working with cover artists, it's working with making posters, it's building the websites, making the store where you sell you can buy books directly from me. So I kind of keep because I'm a one-man band, so I keep and update all of that.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like I said, it's a lot of my day. Mostly during the daylight hours when I'm here in the office. Most of that is doing that kind of stuff, setting up interviews, setting up conventions, et cetera, promotion. Then I write at night, when it's quiet and everybody's gone to bed, and I can sit and write for a while. But I will say this year I have gotten a little more accomplished because I'm home. As opposed to going to a convention or an event every other weekend, or so I'm finally getting back on schedule for where I fell behind. So if there's one good thing to come out of this year, that's it.
Yeah, gotta look at the positives these days.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
All the
Silver
positives.
lining. So I appreciate everybody giving me those answers. I wasn't exactly keeping score, but it occurred to me that 6 authors gave like 11 answers. So I think that's kind of what we're looking at here. That's the good news of the current state of publishing, is that there are so many options. It's great that like I can personally have a completely different way of pursuing this and still be satisfied with the results. So, but it also is, and that's really the point of this conversation. As we approach the halfway point, I want to get back to the point. That's really the point of this conversation. Is there are too many options. It's very confusing. There's problems with every kind of publishing. There's good things with every kind of publishing. Sarah did. I'm gonna put you on the spot again, Sarah. Sarah did a really good job of putting one question in my head. What's your goal? So what I want to do now is I want to give each of you a chance to sort of answer that question in the sense of, how do you help someone who's new to this conversation? How do you help them focus on maybe not the best way of publishing, but what's the way for them to figure out what they're actually trying to achieve? And I'm kind of hopeful that would then point toward less of the different publishing options for that particular person, depending on the answers. Does that make sense, guys? So Sarah, I'm gonna start with you again because it's your question. How do you get someone who's new to this to focus on, like, what do you want them to think about in order for them to figure out what their goal is, what they're trying to achieve with this question of publishing?
Well, there's a lot of different reasons that people write, and there's a lot of different reasons that people want to be published. And I think that if you're looking to make it to the New York Times bestseller list, then yeah, you got to go query agents and you got to figure out how to go that route. But if you're just looking to hold your book in your hands and say, look, I wrote this, there's a lot of other options for you. And that doesn't make you less of a writer or an author to evaluate those options. And I think getting people to look at all the different paths and deciding what works specifically for them at that time, because like you heard everybody else talking, a lot of people do a whole bunch of different options and they build up this whole catalog. Some are self-published, some are small indie presses. They might have, 1 or 2 that go with the big 5. But right now in my, I'm in a debut 2019 group, and there's a lot of big 5 published authors in there. And there's a whole thread that just started up this week about books that they want to self-publish. And I'm going, whoa, like that's really cool that they're branching out in this other way. And it's because at this point, when we're going in and you're going in with your debut novel, you have no idea what you're trying to do. And I think kind of figuring out how to coalesce that down If you're looking for a big payout, you're not going to get rich or probably even break even with a small press or self-publishing with one book. I know I'm in the negative, and I didn't have to pay for anything except for my own marketing and things that I chose to put my money behind. So if you're looking to make money, you're probably looking at the wrong field in general. But I definitely think that it's important to kind of take a step back and figure out what your goals are with the book that you are trying to get out there.
Yeah, that was a really, really hard lesson for me, going into that, because the story, the fantasy series, with the first book for it, Willow of Ashes, this was the story that had been my passion project. It had been with me for so long that it basically was a part of my identity and who I was. And so it was like a little piece of me in this story. So it really meant a lot to me. So while I was really, really happy that I found a small press that actually wanted to publish it, and they published the first book, then we got to the second book. And the second book, for no fault of their own, because they are a business, they could not afford to publish the second book in its entirety as one book. So the only way they could afford to do that is if they split the book, or if I split the book the way I wanted to. My choice. They said, you decide what you want to do with it. And, or we could go full ebook with the full thing and just not have print. And I knew, because this is epic fantasy, I would not survive as an ebook only person, that I needed print. So I decided to try splitting it in half. But if the second one needed to be split in half, that meant all the other consecutive books needed to be split in half because each one was bigger than the last. So I did it. I split the book in half. I had to fill in extra tidbits and everything because, now it suddenly wasn't a full novel without that. And I had to fill in extra plots for every single one of the books. And I had already written up to book 4 by the time I had gotten around to the publishing of book 2 for that traditional publisher. And I got through that line, and I got up to that point where I split all of the books I currently had, and my 5-book series would suddenly turn into a 9-book series, and I would reread everything to go back and edit, and I just kind of felt my soul kind of slowly dying the more I read it in half, because I filled it in with things that I thought were very frivolous, and I didn't want it in there because it just didn't feel right to me being split like that. The stories had been crafted, they'd been like outlined because I am an outliner, and they had all been consecutively arched together for those specific novels, for the volumes, as one, kind of standalone but still consecutive story. And so splitting that up kind of split me up too. And so because of that, I fell out of love with my own story that had been a part of my identity. So that kind of made me realize that I needed it to be singular for each of the books for me to fall back in love with it again. And the minute I realized that, I did fall back in love with my story. The minute everything came back, I loved it again. So that was my decision, saying, okay, I love you guys. I'm so happy that you gave me this opportunity. And I know it's no fault of your own because you just can't afford it, but I love this story so much that I will front the bill to make sure that it's whole. So for me, that's definitely what you were talking about, Sarah. You need to do what is best for your story. And it could be traditional or it could be self-published. It just doesn't really matter as long as it's right for the story. And I had to learn that the hard way.
That's a marvelous point. In fact, it reminded me of seeing somebody had shared a story where they had submitted a screenplay to a competition and had actually gotten pretty high points, but had gotten notes back. So they looked over the notes and they made all the changes that the notes suggested. And when they resubmitted it next year to the same contest, their score went down. And they said, why did my score do? I did everything in the notes they said I should do. I was like, well, probably because you didn't love what they told you to do. It affected your story and you really didn't want to do that. You felt you needed to do that to get a better score. So yeah, you've got to, especially with feedback, you can take it with a grain of salt. If something makes sense, then you can make adjustments, but you don't have to do everything somebody else tells you, because it may, like you said, Ellie, it may not feel right. It may not be what's right for the story. So yeah, you have to be very careful with that.
Well, and I design board games as well. And one thing that I got advice early on for board game design is you either go pitching to a major publisher or you go the Kickstarter route. But if you are going to do a Kickstarter, it's basically like forming your own small business. So if you are not an entrepreneur and you do not want to start your own small business, don't do a Kickstarter. And I think the similar advice for people is like all of you have been saying, know what level of work that you want to do, can do. I've self-taught myself 3 different graphic design softwares, just to be able to do stuff for my own creative, my own creations. And so when you're looking to publish something of yours, if you don't know the answer, thankfully we have this wonderful thing called YouTube, where I believe this is going to probably be where you're watching it, and and you can just like we all tell prospective authors, what should I write? You want to read what you want to write. Go and find those authors that you want to be like and emulate like and so forth, and that's your research. And so there's also for publishing. I mean, you used to, back up here on the bookshelf here, back when I first started, of course, we all did, we had like the writer's market books, and I had to go and buy that big writer's market and crack it open and like, okay, what fits with my material, my manuscript or whatnot, and then submit it. And now you don't have to do that. It's a lot more options. So you could start small and self-publish just so you get something, a foot in the door and a presence, and then be able to maybe parlay that into pitching to one of the big 5 or querying and getting even an agent. So I think there are a lot more options there, but you have to look at what level of investment and what your life looks like. It's amazing for Sarah to have been doing this and as a mother and so forth. And kudos to all of you who have done that when you didn't think that it was really the right time, because there's no right time. Just like having a kid, there's no right time to do it if you wait for the perfect timing. So you just got to get out there and do it, and then just get in where you can fit in.
Yeah, that makes sense. I get this question a lot about the goals, and I always tell people, it's like, knowing your goals your first bet, but also knowing your end goal is one thing, but also set attainable goals and celebrate those. There was a time in my life when the biggest goal I had was, my God, I want to be published by somebody. I wanted a book out there. And so once that goal was met, then it's, what's my next goal? And so I could set goals going forward that way. But there's, like Sarah said, there's no wrong way to do it. If you want to write as a hobby, write as a hobby. There's nothing that says you have to make this your career. There's a lot of people that want to make this their career. And if you want to make it your career, you have to treat it like a job. And what that means, and this is where I usually get people to stumble over, because what that means is, I don't feel like writing today. Tough. I've got to write today. I go to my job, this office, like I would if I worked anywhere else. I would go to that office and sit there from X to X and do my work. This is a job. I have to do that. I have to meet deadlines. Sometimes that means long, late nights. Sometimes it means, sorry, friends, can't go to the movies with you. I've got to work. We all have that. We know that. I mean, but treating it like a job, if that's what you want it to be, is very important. Learning new skills. Man, when I first started out, I wish I'd known that I was going to be running a small business. I would have taken more business classes. A lot of what I've learned the hard way, because I've screwed something up, and I've learned lessons about, that way. But writing for, if you just want to write ebooks and put those out, you can do that. If you want, if money's not your big factor, there are ways you can do it that won't cost you a lot of money, where you can just have stuff out there. You can make them free. There's a lot of people that write because they love it and they put ebooks out and make them free. They just want people to read them. They're not interested in, I've got to make X number of dollars this year. So there's no right or wrong way to path to go that way and what you want to do, as long as it's, what your goal is. Mm-hmm. And I think there's a lot, like I said, there's a lot of places you can look and see what other people do. Certainly, I'm sure we're all on social media. There's other writers on social media. Most writers, if you ask them questions, they will answer them. So, there is a way to at least get some idea of what's ahead. Certainly I always tell people that if you're looking at a publisher, if you see a publisher and go, I would love to submit to them, see who writes for them, find them on social media and ask them, what's this publisher like? Most of the time you'll get an honest answer, especially if they're still working for them. They obviously like something, but they can give you the ins and outs of the publisher. So there's a lot of research you can do going forward. Yeah.
Bobby, I'm sorry to interrupt. Just really quickly want to say, I've spoken on panels with several dozen authors at this point, and every single one of them was not only willing to answer questions, but supportive of the questions. Mm-hmm. I mean, this is a very open, supportive, uplifting group of people who are struggling through an industry which is almost telling them they have to be cutthroat, but they aren't. Right. It's really amazing.
I find the writing community there are exceptions, but for the most part, I find the writing community very welcoming, very supportive. A lot of people really subscribe to that rising tide lifting all boats theory of things. I've met many writers over the years doing conventions or working on anthologies that, if I had a problem, I know they'll help. They'll give me advice, or and so I love that about this industry.
Yep. So we're getting close to the end here. So I got one more question for everybody, and then I think we're going to have to start wrapping it up. I'm gonna pick on Bobby first this time. I want to end on a positive note. I really do, because I think even though we've all struggled at times and had failures of various kinds, I want to end on a positive note. So Bobby, here's the question for you. Pick whatever kind of publishing process you want, and tell us something about what you like about it.
Okay. Well, I do enjoy the idea of creating my own characters in my own, universe, or whatever you want to call it, my own world, my own characters. That's a lot of fun. Doing the self-publishing has really allowed me to focus on characters that are mine, and to do things with them that I want to do. Not to say that working for other publishers and doing things that they want to do is not enjoyable. I still enjoy that as well. But characters that are mine, like Snow here, I can work those all the time, and I can tell the kind of stories that I've been wanting to tell, but no publishers asked me for yet. I like to write a lot of action and crime thrillers. I'm not getting hired by other publishers to do that, so I can do that on my own. So having my own imprint, my own publishing company, allows me to do the stories that I don't get to do anywhere else.
Okay, excellent. Allison, what about you?
Sorry, I do like one of each, since I've done it both ways. I will say, in terms of self-publishing, the first thing I think is, at least for me, it's a lot less pressure. Like, I remember there are times with the small indie publisher, I'd be like, these edits are due yesterday. It's like, oh gosh, am I going to be able to do this by tonight? So obviously when you're self-publishing, it's just like, okay, if the book doesn't come out, this month, it'll come out next month. No one's going to be mad at me, because it's only me who's mad at me if this doesn't work. So it's a lot less pressure. But I do like the collaborative process of working with a small indie publisher, of having someone who's an extra pair of eyes, who can oftentimes bring up feedback where you go, oh, I didn't even think of that. Let me see if that works. And sometimes it works. So the collaboration can be a nice plus with working with someone.
Okay. Okay, so Ellie, Can I get you to give us one thing that you like about one particular method of publishing? There you go.
You're good. She's playing her children's show. Anyway, I guess one major thing for me is more just I like being able to choose who I work with. You know, like with publisher, you don't always get to choose who your artist is for your cover. You don't get to choose your formatter. You don't get to choose who your editors or your proofreaders are. You can choose your beta readers, you know, and that's awesome. But like at the same time, for me, it's really nice to be able to choose someone I absolutely trust, will tell me when something's wrong, and who is in the same mindset of what my style is going for. So if I try and experiment with something, I like knowing that I can trust the person to say, it's really not working for what you're going for, versus I just don't like this style. Because I've had editors like that I didn't really get to choose. I was able to switch over when I talked to my publisher about it, which is great, but at the same time, it's nice being able to trust who you choose. So that's how I feel about it.
Okay. So we've got a few minutes left, so we're gonna get into the lightning round here, which is Kyle, give me one quick thing that you like about one style of publishing.
Well, sure. Though I'd love to have a fat advance from one of the big five and go that route. I do enjoy the creative control of self-publishing, being able to do layout stuff and kind of creative things like that with self-publishing. So that would be my choice and my reason.
Excellent. Okay, Sarah, what you got for us?
Okay, well, I'm going to speak from my own experience, which is very limited, and I feel like I kind of hit the lottery with my small press. They were amazing. So, but there's such variation that, like Bobby said, definitely reach out to authors. I have a ton of people reach out to me all the time about Parliament House, and I am honest about all their wonderful traits and their warts, and they all have them. But I think that working with a press that really values you as a writer goes a long way. I had the very first cover that they sent me for Double Crossing the Bridge was beautiful and gorgeous and had this filigree kind of gold writing on this purple shiny background. And the book is a comedy along the lines of Deadpool. So I was like, I almost cried. I'm sitting here looking at my phone, looking at this cover, and I'm like, my husband looks over my shoulder. He goes, tell them. And then he ran away. Like, he was terrified. But when I went to my publisher and I told her, I was like, this is so wrong, she did a complete 180 and came up with something that I felt really embodied the book instead. And I love that kind of, that they invested so much in me. It was really validating that they cared enough to change directions that way for me. And there's been countless other situations like that. So I really just I think it is really validating, especially for a debut, just to have the support behind you.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. Really quickly, before we run out of time, where can people find you on the internets? Allison.
Yes, I have, my books are on Amazon, Goodreads. Those are the main place. I do have a website. It's scholarandsphinx.wix.com/arcook.
Okay, thank you. Ellie, where can we find you online, Ellie?
You can go to Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or you can go to neckerseam.com or ellierain.com.
Excellent. Kyle, what about you?
You can find my books by just quick Google search. Slang is available on some major retailers, and also Dream of Christmas is on lulu.com. I'm on all the social medias at Poet Kyle.
Sarah?
I am on Amazon with Double Crossing the Bridge, on Goodreads, Kobo, pretty much any major retailer. Also, my website is www.sarahjsover.com. I'm pretty active on Twitter at Sarah J. Sover. I've also got a group for comedic fantasy authors on Twitter as well, and Facebook and Instagram. So yeah, just search my name.
All right, Bobby, take us home.
Okay, my books are mostly available at Amazon. There's a few exceptions. We try to put them, especially the books I do myself through Ben Books, which is my publishing company. We try to put out in paperback, hardcover, audio, ebook, etc. You can find me at bobbynash.com. My publishing company is Ben Books. It's Ben, BEN-books.com. And I'm all over social media. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, etc. Just look me up.
Okay. Well, normally this is the place where I ask for a round of applause, but we're virtual, so I'm just going to fake it as a thank you, everybody. Thank you, panelists. Thank you so much.